This week, 100,000 Spotify accounts leaked in credential stuffing attack. Hacker breached Florida water facility, raising chemical levels to dangerous levels. SonicWall Zero-Day in the SMA 100 series, and multiple Google attacks. Jason Wood joins us for expert commentary on the cyber risks of transportation's connected OT and IoT systems. All that and more on this episode of Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the attackers that put our critical systems in jeopardy. Core Impact from Core Security is a penetration testing tool that safely finds vulnerabilities using the same techniques of adversaries, with certified exploits and wizards that guide you through critical pen tests while maximizing the time of advanced testers by automating their routines. With Core Security, you can safeguard your infrastructure by limiting access, detecting threats, testing for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitoring data. Visit securityweekly.com/core security.
Welcome, everyone, to Security Weekly News, episode 99 for February 9th, 2021. I am your host, Matt Alderman, sitting in for Doug White, Paul Asadorian, and every other more qualified host than I am for this show. And now for the security news for the week. 100,000 Spotify accounts leaked in credential stuffing attack. It was recently revealed that Spotify has suffered its second credential stuffing attack in 3 months. It's estimated that almost 100,000 accounts can face a takeover. In November 2020, over 380 million Spotify user records were exposed on an unprotected Elasticsearch database. However, on February 4th, Bob Diachenko, a security researcher, uncovered a Spotify logger database that was extracted by using yet another credential stuffing attack. Spotify has acknowledged the attack and stated the credential data available online has been taken down. If you are on Spotify, change your password immediately. More importantly, if that same password is being used for other accounts, those passwords must be changed as well. Hacker breached Florida water facility, raising chemical levels to dangerous levels. On February 5th, an unidentified hacker broke into the computer system of a water treatment plant for a town outside of Tampa, Florida. A remote access interface, which has now been disabled, was breached, allowing access to the water treatment system. The attacker was able to remotely access the system for up to 5 minutes and raise the level of sodium hydroxide, also known as lye, by a factor of more than 100. According to officials, at no time was there a significant adverse effect on the water being treated. Importantly, the public was not in danger. The FBI, U.S. Secret Service, and local officials are investigating the attack. SonicWall Zero-Day in the SMA 100 series. According to an NCC Group spokeswoman, our team has observed signs of an attempted exploitation of a vulnerability that affects the SonicWall SMA 100 series devices. During a Monday update, SonicWall representatives said the company's engineering team confirmed that the submission by NCC Group included a critical zero-day in the SMA 100 series 10.x code. SonicWall is tracking it as SNWLID-2021-0001. The SMA 100 series is a line of secure remote access appliances. There is speculation this is related to the SolarWinds attack, but it is just that, speculation. Google users face multiple attacks, including Android and Google Chrome. So first up, Android app infects millions of devices with a single update. A popular Android app called Barcode Scanner was turned into malware through a software update and could have infected up to 10 million devices. Late last year, researchers learned some people were seeing ads that opened the default browser without user interaction. These ads seemingly came from nowhere, and none of the users had recently downloaded any new applications except from Google Play. Malwarebytes researchers say malicious code had been added that wasn't in the earlier versions of the app, and that this new code used heavy obfuscation to avoid detection. The team confirmed this version was signed by the same digital certificate as previous clean versions, indicating that it came from the same app developer, LavaBird Limited. Google has pulled the app from the store, but affected users need to actually remove the app from their device. Next up, fake ForcePoint Google Chrome extension hacks Windows users. In a unique attack, cybercriminals locally install an extension to manipulate data in internal web applications that the victims have access to by using Google's cloud syncing function. The malicious add-in is disguised as a ForcePoint endpoint Chrome extension for Windows, with the attackers using the security company's logo to enhance an air of legitimacy. The authors of the malicious ForcePoint add-on were able to steal information from users' internal extensions thanks to setting up a behind-the-scenes chat between the malicious extension and other web apps using a function called chrome.runtime.onConnectExternal.addListener. Once the port object, called port.onMessage.addListener, is employed, the extension can then steal credentials, mail and OAuth tokens from the victim's machine. To protect your environment, admins should make sure that Chrome extensions are controlled by allowing only approved extensions and blocking everything else. And yet another Chrome extension attack. The Great Suspender Chrome extension used by millions was malware. On Thursday, Google removed one of its popular Chrome extensions called the Great Suspender from the Chrome Web Store because it was infected with malware. The extension was downloaded over 2 million times before being deleted. Its purpose was to suspend unused tabs and replace them with a blank gray screen until reloaded. Its original developer, Dean Omcheki, is suspected of having sold the extension to an unidentified entity in June of last year. 2 new versions were released on the Chrome Web Store, version 7.1.8 and 7.1.9 after the acquisition. Both versions are suspected to having the malware. Alternatives include using version 7.1.6 or other alternatives like OneTab, Tabs Outliner, and Session Buddy. And finally, a good old Google Chrome attack. Google fixed a Chrome Zero-Day under active attack. Security reacher Matthias Bulens has caught a zero-day affecting Google Chrome browser that is actively under attack. Google's advisory describes it as a heap buffer overflow in version 8 of the Chrome browser. It has been assigned CVE 2021-21148 with a high severity rating. The fix is included in Chrome release 88.0.4324.150. While not many details about the bug are out yet, Google researchers revealed that hackers linked to North Korea were targeting security researchers with an elaborate social engineering campaign that set up trusted relationships with them and then infected their organization system with custom backdoor malware. Okay, that's enough of the news. Let's welcome Jason Wood as he joins us today for expert commentary on the cyber risks of transportation's connected OT and IoT systems. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, Matt. Good to be here with you today. We were talking before the show. It's been a little while since we got to do a podcast together.
Yeah, I pulled up my notes. The last time I did this show was August of 2019. That's why I said there were a lot of people in line to replace me on this show.
Well, welcome. Good to have you here with us. Hey, everybody. So I don't normally talk about vendor blog posts for my stories and my commentary, but this post kind of caught my attention. It was titled "The Cyber Risks of Transportation Connected OT and IoT Systems." And I started looking into this in part because of Matt's story about the water treatment plant in Florida being attacked and having their systems modified. And while this post focuses specifically on the transportation sector, the ideas I think that are here can be discussed much more broadly than just that. What strikes me about this, as they're describing this, is some of the fragility that we have in systems that we really depend on heavily, and how the ability to disrupt those systems is now, it looks very widely available remotely. So let's take a look at the blog post. It begins by mentioning a report done by the University of Cambridge. As it turns out, this was for Lloyd's London, as they're talking about insurance and risks there. But they took a look at the impact of a virus infection, whatever that is, in major seaports in Asia, and they tossed out a number. If this was to happen, potential for $110 billion in losses. If these ports were closed because of a virus outbreak. Now that does include like all of the ports in Japan, the major ports in Japan and Korea and China and all throughout that region. So you're talking about not just a outbreak, you're talking about a lot of outbreaks. But nonetheless, the point here is that these systems are set up pretty poorly, it sounds like. We've got isolated loose systems that are, doing one thing only and aren't really connected into a larger infrastructure very well. And this environment depends on that sort of thing. You don't have to close all of the ports in Asia, for example, to have an impact that gets felt very quickly around the world. I mean, you just picture a container ship on its own is carrying thousands of containers of shipping containers of goods to other parts of the world. Now you start to impact that across multiple ships, and this starts getting out of hand pretty quick. And this is not all just stuff that we bought on Amazon, right? When we're talking about car parts to fix cars that we depend on to get to work, and things we need to run our businesses and stay employed and stuff like that. So could we really reach out pretty quick? They talk about operational technology, OT, which always catches me off guard because my brain is just wired for IT at this point. But OT systems and the lack of controls that they have in place. For example, reused passwords are very common on these systems, apparently, because they're not hooked into a domain for authentication. They talk about maybe having some antivirus and some kind of endpoint security controls on it, and that's about it. And they have the ability to remote into these things because who wants to drive out to wherever this thing is every time they have to make a change on it. So, I'm picturing like a Windows 7 desktop sitting out there with minimal controls in place and without a whole lot of maintenance going on, because as long as it keeps working, who cares? We've all seen how well that works in the IT world. So, now we have that being in control, though, of physical systems. Like let's say maybe a railway signal. That would be a bit of a problem. And then when you think about that, now you start adding on to that, though, they're starting to make heavy use of IoT devices, which we have talked about extensively across all of the podcasts here in Security Weekly about the lack of security controls and capabilities that those devices have. So that's the problem that we have. We have this huge infrastructure or related infrastructures that we depend on that are now using or have been using systems that are very fragile, poorly maintained, and performing critical functions. And then we can just step back and maybe a little bit from there from transportation. This type of deployment isn't limited to just transportation. Matt and I were talking a little bit about some of his background and concerns he has about this sort of stuff. You could have this deployment at water sanitation facilities, electric power distribution, and obviously water treatment plants. You have that attack on the treatment plant in Florida where they increased the lye ratio or measurements being put into the water from 100 parts per million to 11,100 parts per million, which was a dangerous level. And they did make a big deal of saying, well, we had other systems that would have caught this before it got released out to the public, and that's good. We would want to have that. But at the same time, what happens when they have to stop the water flow to this city because we've got to deal with a bunch of water that is now dangerous to be consumed? definitely sucks if you're in a city that's been hit with water restrictions, boil orders, or just flat out shut off. So that obviously is a huge problem for us. We depend on these systems so heavily. We've seen over the last year just how illness can affect things that we depend on. COVID-19 to me it really highlighted some of the dependencies we have for life to function as normal. Once those get interrupted to some extent, we start feeling that very, very quickly. One of the thoughts that came to mind is, as I looked at this, was also about the threat landscape. Who are the actors out there that we have to be concerned with? And typically, we're concerned with the criminal folks and state-sponsored adversary groups and folks just kind of taking things for a joyride, if you will. But we have had groups like, let's say, LulzSec, who has banded together to carry out a variety of attacks for different reasons. Mostly they were disruptive. But we've also seen recently here in the United States where we've got angry people storming the U.S. Capitol building. And, what would happen if we combine, somebody like LulzSec with the Proud Boys, for example, or some other group that's even more prone to violence and don't care if they hurt people? What if they got in and they started just randomly carrying things out because they don't care how much damage that they cause? In the past, when we talk about state-sponsored adversaries, there's some restraint here because countries, are aware that there's reprisals and things they have to be concerned with. But a group like this, they may not care. So I think it's really interesting. It's something to think about a little bit. Maybe a new threat model we need to consider here inside of security. We've built these highly interdependent systems using poorly secured technology, and our threat landscape has changed somewhat as far as the people that may decide to carry out some type of activity that could really hurt some people. And we can start to make some pretty good guesses about how some of these attacks will be carried out because, as I described that infrastructure, that's stuff that we've seen in IT for years that we've dealt with and we are continuing to deal with. So I think it's good for us here in the security step back a little bit. Let's think about some of the changes to our threat landscape. What do we need to do? What message do we need to start carrying to the leaders of our organizations, our communities, and things like that to help better prepare for maybe this type of this type of scenario? Hopefully, nothing like that ever happens. But we live in turbulent times, and we've got a lot of systems out there that are built in part on the idea that there's going to be restraint in others that may not exist or be maintainable. So go ahead and take a read of the article. Like I said, it's kind of interesting to read through, but step back and think about it from a broader perspective, and that's where I think this starts to get really interesting.
Jason, we've seen kind of a whole new market emerge around OT security. The sponsor of this blog post, there are others as well. There's probably 4 or 5 companies kind of in the space. We also saw some major acquisitions in the space. Tenable acquired one of those OT companies. Fortinet did as well. So we've seen some activity in this space with some very specialized products. What I want people to realize is that most of these types of systems they focus on safety, not security. Because I came out of the nuclear industry. I spent 7.5 years in nuclear power in my previous career before getting into security. It's all about safety. I spent a little bit of time in oil and gas refinery. It's safety. We've seen a lot with the water systems and critical infrastructure. They're very safety focused, but there is a security angle here that we do have to think about because we're connecting these systems to other IT systems and therefore they are exposed.
Yeah, and we have this safety built in for them to operate normal and be safe for, they're being operated safely. And so if somebody gets in like this situation in Florida, now we have somebody who's deliberately doing something to not be safe. So
right,
that aspect's a little bit spooky. There was redundancy built into the system to catch things, right, but it doesn't mean that there's no impact to the public. Even if nobody gets sick.
it's usually availability. And in a power plant, there would be systems that kicked in that maybe shut down the plant when now I don't have enough power. Now I could potentially get a brownout. And we saw what happened back in 2004 when we lost the entire power grid in the Northeast. I mean, that's the potential ramification of these types of attacks.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Jason, always a pleasure getting your insight. I'd like to thank everyone for joining and listening today. We'll see you on Friday for the weekly recap on Security Weekly News.